Elena Crete is the head of the Climate and Energy Program at the UN Sustainable Development Network in New York, USA, which I'm assuming is you're in New York. We've just had speakers from Geneva and Washington, D.C. And all right, so you're in New York, and as the head of the Climate and Energy Program, you focus on special initiatives for deep decarbonation pathways project and America's Zero Carbon Action Plan. And there is probably half a dozen other things you're engaged in, one of which might be what you will be talking about today. So let me shut up and let you folks speak about all of that. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Professor Gable. Really appreciate the invitation. And hi, everyone. My name is Elena Crete, and I'm honored to be speaking with you all today. When I was invited and I was trying to scope out exactly what initiatives and projects I might share with you, just to kind of color in and give you an idea of exactly what SDSN does, I was kept going back to our Net Zero on Campus guide, which Julie here helped to create. And I thought, why not just invite her, given that she was part of the thought leadership in the creation of it and then in the authorship of it. So Julie Topf is she's an intern, but way more than an intern. So she's our climate energy program coordinator. So she's been supporting me with a variety of the projects, which I'm about to share with you today, and then turn to her to share about the Net Zero on Campus guide. But she comes to us from the University of Miami, where she also was a thought leader in a lot of her student activities and working specifically to institutionalize several sustainability projects on her campus in Miami, which is what drew me to her as an intern. And she's soon going to be a full-time SDSN staff because she's absolutely fabulous, and we're so excited to have her. So I'm excited also to share her with you all today. So Julie, I'll just go ahead and get started, and then we'll turn to you halfway through. Perfect. Great. So assuming you can all see my slides here. Hold on, let me move this to my other screen so I'm looking at you. There we go. Is that still okay? Cool. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to try and give you guys a good idea of what the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is. I wonder if actually, before I even get started here, could I get a show of hands, digital hands, of if you've heard of SDSN before? Either the raise hand function in Zoom or in your videos. I know there's not a lot of videos on. Oh, a couple. 3.
You're also asking a question that hasn't been asked before, so people might not be familiar with how to find the hand gesture.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm just curious. So definitely a couple of you, which is good to know. All right. So I'm still going to give you kind of the good, solid background on what we are and how we have evolved over the years. And then I want to spend a good amount of time just going into the specific programming of the climate and energy program at large. Oops, sorry, I see my slides are advancing here without me. So yeah, we're gonna spend the majority of the time here going through that, and then we wanna definitely have like a Q&A portion at the end so we can really interact with you all and get to know you as well. So please hold on to your questions or jump them in the chat, and then we'll turn to them at the very end. So just a quick high-level overview, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I'm going to use the acronym SDSN for the rest of the call. But so we were created actually in 2012. We were put together at the request of the Secretary General at the time, who reached out to our boss, Jeffrey Sachs, asking him to bring together the thought leaders and researchers and knowledge institutions of the world to help figure out what should be the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. At the time, they were still working on creating the goals, the indicators, the targets, all that make up the 2030 agenda, which I'm assuming most of you are familiar with. When that agenda was then institutionalized at the UN in 2015, SDSN got a new mandate, which was to now mobilize these academic and research institutions to implement the SDGs all over the world. And so we do that through three primary modes of operation. So first in policy analysis and research, second in cultivating projects and initiatives through our global network of knowledge institutions, and third through education. And so that's education on sustainable development, but also a focus on restructuring our educational systems around the world to mediate the pedagogy of sustainable development and really incorporating it into our academia at large. So just to put it more simply, our mission is to promote integrated approaches to the implement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement through education, research, policy analysis, and global cooperation. This image here is just giving you an idea of our global coverage of our members. So we have currently more than 1,800 members around the world. And the way that we work with them are through 53, this is a changing and constantly growing number, but 53 national and regional networks that are hosted by local universities in these areas that then convene the members locally to work on the SDGs. And this work really is very, very different wherever you're talking about it around the world. Some of our networks really focus on well-being and happiness, where others focus more on poverty alleviation or gender issues, the entire spectrum of the SDG agenda. Some of them really focus on, quantifying progress towards the SDGs and a data focus, where others are more about a qualitative, advocacy campaign. So it depends on the capacity and interest of the local network host, the chairs who convene that network, and then also the members that make up that part of the network. What are their interests and what do they see as the key issues in their region to address and make progress on? So we really do let these networks operate pretty much autonomously around the world. And then SDSN, as the secretariat, works to bring them into the UN and into these global fora so we can elevate their grassroots research and initiatives into these global campaigns. And so we have offices in New York, Paris, and Malaysia currently to convene these networks. So digging a little bit more into the climate and energy program, which I am the head of. So obviously this is programming that's focused on addressing the Paris Agreement and trying to help countries get on track to their 1.5-degree commitment as part of the Paris Agreement. We do that through several modalities. First off, by trying to support the technical capacities of different signatory governments to the UNFCCC. So either by providing advisory services, research support, and linking those governments with the local academic community to really try to address some of the key knowledge gaps to progress on their climate commitments. A second way is through charting 2050 decarbonization strategies. I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a moment when I talk about our specific projects. Third is through creating an intensive global dialogue. This might sound like a given, but I think one of the key niche powers of academics is that they're able to really bring about some of the tough questions that might seem a little bit theoretical or visionary, but that's really how we see the progress made on the Sustainable Development Agenda. And so we really try to work with our members to cultivate this space to create this dialogue on solving some of the really big existential issues related to climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals. And then lastly, enhancing a global exchange of partnerships on technology solutions. So we know that it can't just be the academics and it can't just be the governments that need to work on this agenda, but we do need to work with the private sector. We need to work with our municipalities and our city networks. So we really do also try to take a multi-stakeholder approach when possible and to work alongside other networks. So just this table that you're looking at here, this is kind of just a matrix of the different projects that are under our climate and energy programming. I'm not going to go through all of them. It would be a much longer presentation, but just I bolded a few of the ones that I'll touch upon. And again, just to give you an idea of the actual work that SDSN undertakes. So starting with our Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, this has actually only been underway. We're about to enter into our second year. It took us quite a number of years to institutionalize this group within the UN, specifically because it has a direct tie to the Executive Office of the Secretary General. And that is not an easy linkage to formalize. And so we currently have 48 engineers from around the world who are specialists across to the energy transition, whether it be concrete and cement decarbonization, steel, hydrogen, electrification, all of the different themes related to the energy transition. We have worked to identify some of the top experts and have them convened and available to address any of the questions that the Secretary General is having as he supports member states on their missions towards achieving the Paris Agreement. A second part of our work is really anchored in the concept of developing long-term decarbonization pathways. So this is primarily based in energy system modeling work, in which we try to work with researchers to create blueprints of what the energy system might look like to prove the technical feasibility of reaching any specific greenhouse gas reduction target. So these are not projections like climate models, but actually kind of the opposite. We take a future emissions scenario, and then we create a pathway in which we could envision our energy system and infrastructure in order to get to that future scenario. So these really are clear and science-based, where we identify the technologies, the investments, and the policies that are needed in order to get us on these pathways. This is meant to be a tool for decision makers, not an absolute answer to the question of how do we get there, but really just a method that could be used to understand what are the trade-offs under different scenarios and under different decisions, because there always are going to be one. If you choose one technology, you're not choosing another. You could go faster, you can go slower. There are a lot of different conditions under which you can transition. And so helping our stakeholders and decision makers to understand what are the implications of those decisions really helps us to enable the science-based policymaking, which is a term we hear often. And then the other thing that is unique about our approach is that it's long-term. Many decision makers are thinking often in the timeline of quarters, maybe years, depending on what their term in office is. Very seldom are they thinking on a multi-decadal scale, which is what is required of climate change planning and decarbonization planning. And so our models do that. They look out to mid-century and beyond to really understand how do the investments that we make today and the infrastructure that we build today, how long do they last, and how long will that impact our emissions? And ultimately, what will we need to do to either retrofit or to accompany those infrastructure choices in order to actually achieve a carbon neutral future? So these are some really big questions, and we work with some of the top energy modelers in the world to try and design these pathways. So this work was originally kicked off in 2015 under the Deep Decarbonization Pathway Project. This project was my predecessor. I got to come into SDSN after this work was done, where we really got to transition into the modality of operationalizing these pathways. So in this original project, 16 of the biggest emitting countries convened country teams to design pathways. At the time, to be honest, they were going to an 80% by 2050 reduction. And in 2015, that was revolutionary and visionary. The fact that now the conversation is all about net zero pathways is really exciting. And most of these pathways have been updated to show that that is also technically feasible. So this was really groundbreaking work and was pivotal to helping the Paris Agreement at the time, where people were still debating if it was even possible to get on these kind of pathways. So they can be really helpful for a variety of decision-making aspects. So first off, lowering the risk of dead-end strategies, understanding that a lot of the infrastructure in buildings, in energy system, power creation, in transmission lines, in roads, these these things last a very long time in our society. And so we need to really understand exactly how long do they last and how long will they impact our emissions, to help lower the risk of dead-end strategies or stranded assets. They also help us to understand commonalities, or what we call low regret strategies. So where we see trends across several different kinds of scenarios, we can then be more confident in decision making that that is likely to happen or less likely to happen. And then they also help us situating near-term policy targets within the longer-term goals. So I think I already covered that when I was talking about the multi-decadal approach, but it really just does change the entire thinking of a policymaker who has a much shorter time frame. And then also trying to identify key decision points. So there's also a lot of our emitting technologies that currently exist and that do have retirement ages, putting those onto a pathway to really understand at what point in time are we going to need a replacement to those technologies or that infrastructure, and how do we start planning for that now so that we're ready to do so in a sustainable way, is a big part of these pathways. This is just a quick timeline. This is drilling into specifically our US pathway work. So on the left here, you see our 2015 report. This was really just the energy system and looking at how to decarbonize by mid-century and its technical feasibility. Over the years since 2015, we've actually worked with a variety of stakeholders to look at a different regions across the US, so in the Northeast, the Southwest, and the Midwest, to understand what were the opportunities in those regions, and what would be required in order to decarbonize those. And then this all culminated in an updated report, the America's Zero Carbon Action Plan in 2020. So in this report, we used the pathways as an underlying understanding of what did we need to do to get to net zero. But then we accompanied those pathways with two new analysis. One, understanding what federal policies would be required and what kind of financing in order to enable that transition. And at the time when we were writing this, we were writing it kind of with fingers crossed that we would be delivering this to the new Biden administration within their first month of office, which was exactly what we ended up doing. So that was a little bit of a risk, but it ended up paying off. And then the second analysis we did was on the industrial policy of the country and understanding the potential job implications. So how many jobs were at risk? What sectors would we see reducing, which ones would be scaling, and then how do you also enable a transition among those sectors and do it in a sustainable and just way? So that was also a big part of that analysis. So in America's Zero Carbon Action Plan, we covered 6 major sectors in addition to doing this policy and jobs analysis. And one really exciting thing is that this work was also in the 2021 ended up actually being cited in the US President's Office long-term pathways. So they did see it, they were able to get it, and we'd like to think that this is part of the reason why the US is now able to be so ambitious with a lot of the bipartisan act and other acts that are underway, drawing from our work. And then one of the big learnings also from the national work was, while it was great to help and support the federal government in their planning, a lot of this work, specifically when you're talking about infrastructure transitioning, it happens on the ground. It happens at the city level, at the regional level, at the county level. And so after this was published, a next step of this work was to really see if it was feasible to translate it to a more a more local setting. And so we did that actually with the San Diego Regional Decarbonization Framework. Sorry for the mouthful there. We call it the RDF. So this was work that was, we were contacted by the County of San Diego, who saw our national work and said, this is great. San Diego County has a mandate by the state of California to figure out how to reach net zero emissions by 2045. And we need help with creating a plan of how we're going to get there. And one of the things that they highlighted was that while there are several jurisdictions working on climate action planning for many years, this is not new, they were doing it in a very disjointed way, and also from kind of a year-to-year perspective and looking at the incremental progress they could make, but not really thinking about the larger transformations that they would need to make as a region. And so led by our chair of SDSN USA, who is Gordon McCord at the UC San Diego. He convened a team of researchers to work over the course of about a year and a half to design the San Diego Regional Decarbonization Framework, which is now completed and exists. And I believe they are now working on a playbook, so helping to support the county in the implementation of the pathways that were created in this work. And what was unique what was unique about this, as I tried to describe as in the past, we continue to iterate on our methodology and add to it. What we found when you did this kind of downscaling to a locality is that it would be really hard to understand the implications of this transition without understanding where exactly you're talking about. And so we worked actually with a new methodology where we did a bit of a geospatial analysis to really understand if we're talking about siting utility scale solar, where will that exist? What kind of transmission lines would need to be created? Where in the city are there opportunities for rooftop solar? So really starting to put all of that on an actual map and understand what land was technically feasible was incredibly helpful, specifically in talking with the local community, who, first off, decarbonization is a little bit of a aloof topic. What does that mean to me? How does that impact my life? But when you start putting actual infrastructure changes or possibilities on a map and people can see it, in their neighborhood or nearby, it really starts to be much more tangible, and is key to helping the community to understand the implications and be part of the discussion. And so this work was done very inclusively and with the community. We had monthly meetings where we got their feedback and really did include their voice in the development of the work. And then accompanying this RDF, and this is part of the work that Julie has done with me as well, we got the opportunity to kind of serve as SDSN. Our role in this is really to be the interlocutor, to help identify people within our network that could fill knowledge gaps or provide specific research assets to support this work. We don't actually do the research. We're really the convener of the scientists and the experts that then do the work. However, we had the unique opportunity to really follow this entire project really closely, almost like flies on the wall. And what we ended up doing was producing a guide which other municipalities could then replicate the exercise that was undertaken by San Diego. And so we extracted all of the methodologies that were used, both in the operational side of like, how was the project team created, what kind of skills were needed, what kind of budget, and then also the tools. So what kind of analysis, what kind of modeling software was used, and then so that a jurisdiction could potentially take this off of the shelf and really pull it apart, see what parts are pertinent to them, and try to do a similar kind of comprehensive long-term planning exercise. And so Julie and I these days are really trying to promote this guide across the US and globally, so that we can support other jurisdictions to follow a similar path. Julie, I think I've just talked way too much. I think I'm gonna pass it over to you, so maybe you can share our Net Zero on Campus initiative.
Perfect. Thank you, Elena. So hi, everyone. I'm Julie, and I'm from SDSN's Climate and Energy team. And like Elena mentioned, I also helped coordinate our Net Zero on Campus initiative, which we're really excited to be sharing with you all today. So today I'll be talking about all the different components that fall under this larger Net Zero on Campus project, and also some ways that you can be a part of it. So our Net Zero on Campus project was really created based on our recognition of how thousands of universities around the world have already pledged to reach net zero by 2050, and hundreds are expected to already actually reach net zero as early as 2030 and 2040. So we created this project to give universities the information and tools they need to act on those commitments, while also building a global community for colleges and universities around the world to support each other in their decarbonization efforts through our network. And the initiative was led by the Climate and Energy team at SDSN, Monash University, a leading public research university in Australia, and the Climate Work Centre, which is a nonprofit organization based in Australia that works to advance research and climate action in their region. And Monash University is a longtime member of SDSN, and they actually approached us with the idea of creating some sort of project where they would be able to share their firsthand campus decarbonization experience with other universities around the world through SDSN's global network. So together we created this project, and we were also supported by our partners, Second Nature and the EAUC, which are both very large and well-known university sustainability networks. And in the scoping and development of this project, we really made it a priority to focus on filling the gaps that we found in the literature and the resource pool, because when we were originally designing this project, we began to recognize how a lot of different resources and tools already existed in order to support climate action on university and college campuses. So our aim through this project was to build on those and also to link to them. And unlike the majority of those other resources that we saw in the beginning, when we were designing the project, we focused on diving deeply into campus operations and providing up-to-date why and how-to information, sharing detailed case studies from different regions across the world in order to be representative of different contexts, and also providing strategies to empower students to help drive change on their campuses, because we recognize that a lot of those existing tools and guides targeted the university administration level. So we wanted to add to that and build on those strategies. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, our Net Zero on Campus initiative is actually made up of 3 different key components. So the Net Zero on Campus guide is a standalone report that relates to the online toolkit, which I'll get into a little bit later. But the guide provides guiding principles and high-level strategies, and is meant to inform the why and the what aspects of what falls under a university's net zero journey. And then the accompanying online toolkit provides open source resources, so guides, articles, videos, networks and campaigns, case studies, and links to other databases and platforms to provide universities with the actual tools they can use to start and accelerating their net zero journeys. So it's really meant to inform the how. And then in combination with both of those resources, the Global Community of Practice was actually officially launched last week, and it's meant to provide a space for college and university sustainability stakeholders to engage with each other and learn from one another on an ongoing basis. And this community is made up of a quarterly newsletter that goes out through email, and also a LinkedIn group, which I'll share the link to a little bit later in the presentation. So altogether, in this way, the project is meant to equip universities with both the knowledge and the tools they need to accelerate their climate action plans, and also creating a community, a global community among them. And we designed the project to be used by a variety of different campus stakeholders in order to enable both the bottom-up and top-down action needed to achieve decarbonization. So these groups include campus sustainability managers, university administration and facilities operators, university board members and directors, and also student bodies, because all of these different groups have direct control over their campus operations. And the initiative was also designed to be suitable for universities of different sizes and regions, and also decarbonization experiences in progress, ranging from those that are in a pre-commitment stage to those that are already ready for implementation. And in order to ensure that diverse needs and perspectives of universities from across the world were embedded throughout the whole project, we formed a university advisory panel made up of university sustainability and facilities managers from across 8 different regions, which you can see displayed on the map here. And our advisors really provided their expert input and shared case studies, testimonials, and firsthand experiences to help contribute to the content of both the guide and the toolkit. So we had representation from Jamaica, Bolivia, South Africa, Spain, the US, Hong Kong, Pakistan, and India. And based on all of this expert input, our guide highlights these high-level principles to consider in a net zero campus journey. So building institutional structures is really crucial to help prepare and implement decarbonization projects in ways that drive transparency and accountability and stakeholder participation. And we also highlight how a comprehensive net zero plan should aim to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions, so across scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, while also emphasizing that plans must target reaching net zero emissions either by or before the year 2050. And in order to do this, universities and colleges should set medium-term, interim targets in order to be able to review their progress on an ongoing basis all the way to 2050. And these long and medium-term targets should be backed by ambitious actions that demonstrate immediate emissions reductions to help secure support from key stakeholders on the journey to mid-century. And universities can also get a lot more support and buy-in from key stakeholders by conducting cost-benefit analysis, which allows universities to build evidence-based plans. And then continuously reviewing progress to net zero helps promote accountability and transparency, and also lets plans adapt and leverage latest technology innovations and policy innovations throughout the decades. And finally, universities and colleges are also uniquely positioned to be agents of change in their communities and beyond, because we call them living labs and respected thought leaders and conveners, so they can help leverage all those resources and build alliances to reach net zero. And while keeping all of these guiding principles in mind, colleges and universities can realize their journeys to net zero through a variety of different initiatives. And in our project, we have identified 17 different practical campus initiatives across these action areas of energy, mobility, facilities, waste and recycling, procurement, and also initiatives that extend beyond campus operations. So the content of the guide and the toolkit correspond to each of these campus action areas and initiatives. And the first 5 action areas focus on campus operations and the biggest sources of campus emissions. So we show how emissions reductions can be achieved through energy, so by reducing energy demand, through energy efficiency and sourcing renewable energy, mobility by encouraging sustainable travel and transitioning to zero emission vehicles, facilities with sustainable building practices, waste and recycling by using circular economy principles, and the value chain by using sustainable procurement practices across supply chains. And then also, as I mentioned, beyond campus operations, they can drive change through leadership and engage student bodies and education, research, and innovation. And in the guide, each initiative is detailed with an overview, benefits and challenges, and resources to assist with their actual implementation on campus. And in addition to all of the resources highlighted in the actual guide itself, there's even more, a greater variety of tools can be found in the online toolkit. And the online toolkit can be found on SDSN's website, and it contains hundreds of different resources that can be used to actually implement the initiatives described in the guide. And the online toolkit offers resources, case studies, and links to other databases and resource hubs. And what's really interesting about our toolkit is that each of these resources can be filtered to find the tools that are most applicable to your university or the user that's just doing research. So they can be filtered by different characteristics, including their theme, their action area, the initiative, their type, and also the decarbonization stage of the university. And as I just mentioned, these are just examples of all the different characteristics that a resource can be filtered by. And these filter and sort options can be used to narrow down your search when you're searching for a specific resource. And I did just want to highlight that the toolkit provides, a lot of different kinds of resources, including commitments and databases, reports, web pages, online courses, and videos. And now I'm going to go through quickly just the key steps that you can take in order to dig into our online toolkit, the resource library. So the first step is to navigate to our project page on the SDSN website, which you can see on the slide here. And then you scroll down to the online toolkit in the table of contents, and you click on that link in order to access the resources. And then you'll be brought down to the actual toolkit itself, where you can choose which campus action area that you want to dig into a little bit further. So like I mentioned before, the energy, mobility, facilities, waste and recycling, and value chain. But we also have an additional section in the online toolkit that provides even more resources related to different university climate and sustainability networks, and also initiatives and coalitions that have been launched at the annual Conference of the Parties, which is the big climate conference hosted by the United Nations every year. So, oh, sorry. Once you decide which campus action area you want to dig into, you can just click on that link that says to access the resources and case studies. But in this case, we'll dig into the energy one as an example. So this is what it looks like once you enter one of the campus action area pages. And if you're looking for a resource or tool, and I think there's a transition here if you can click. Yeah, perfect. If you're looking for a resource or tool, you can scroll down to the resource library, which looks like this grid that you can see on the left-hand side, where you can click on each of the resources to expand the full details. And then if you're looking for a case study, you just scroll down a little bit past that, and you'll see all the different relevant case studies that show up from universities around the world relevant to that action area that you've chosen to dig into. And as I promised earlier, there's a lot of different ways that we are inviting our global network to get involved with the initiative. So if you are affiliated with a university, you don't have to be a current student, or if you want to just learn more about decarbonization on campus in general, we invite you to be a part of our community you can scan this QR code to take you directly to our project page on our website, where you can access more information and also different links to get involved. We invite you, if you know any university stakeholders, we are inviting them to share their case studies in order to, exchange learning and lessons learned about specific projects carried out on campuses around the world to feature in our online toolkit. We also invite universities and individuals to join our community and learn more about the SDGs across SDSN's different programs. And we also invite you to check out and use very, very notable free courses and resources provided by SDSN's SDG Academy, which Elena will talk about next.
Perfect, Julie. I'm going to go through that very quickly. I just wanted to add, though, you did a great job. Thank you so much for explaining our initiative, which has we published a guide around Earth Day in April this year, but we just launched the community. And so one point, the guide, while it's targeted at universities and campuses, it really could be applied to different kinds of entities. So like a private sector business and even a small city or municipality. The resources are very translatable. And then secondly, the reason that we're supplementing the guide and this resource directory with this community of practice is we realize the experiences of trying to get on a net zero pathway are so nuanced. There isn't like a silver bullet. There's not an algorithm. There's no formula. Like you need to deal with your own unique stakeholders, challenges, resource availability, geography, geopolitics, etc. And so really making sure that we're cultivating a space for joint learning from people who are either just starting on this journey or have been on it for literally 10 years is what we're hoping to achieve with this community of practice. So please do get involved if any of that sounded of interest or if you want to learn more. I'm realizing we're running out of time, so I only actually had 2 slides left anyway. I just wanted to mention this to all of you, that SDSN also, in its initiative to promote education, we have an SDG Academy. And so this is an open, an online directory of open courses that are available for free. Most of them are self-paced, and they cover a variety of themes related to the Sustainable Development Goals. You see one that I worked on here, climate action, solutions for a changing planet. There's also ones on human rights and human wrongs, nature-based solutions, natural resources for sustainable development. They're all a variety of lengths and commitments, so just go to the Academy to check them out. And then last slide, so as far as the impact of these, what we call MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses, we've had over 700,000 people enroll in these variety of classes on a variety of platforms. We try to make it accessible globally, and so these courses are hosted on a variety of these platforms listed here. And then some of the top performing MOOCs, if we could direct you to any of like the best ones, are the nature-based solutions, the best start in life, global public health, and then also sustainable cities. And so with that, I think I will stop sharing. And thank you all for your time and attention. And hopefully you found some of that interesting. Julie, maybe we could drop in the Net Zero Guide website link if anybody wants to go dig around in that more, but also open to questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you even more. This was fantastic. You really covered a huge amount of ground. So thank you for that, but also thank you for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I mean, you're probably not the right people to thank, but its existence and what you're doing is just absolutely stunning. It's fantastic. And thank you for doing the work. I had a question, Elena, but you jumped in and answered it already. And it was like the toolkit, is it applicable to other things, like cities and stuff? But I want to push that one step further. What about for the developing world? Would it be applicable in, say, Africa or African villages or South America and outside of the US system?
That's a great question. I would say yes, although it does have a lot of Western material as far as procurement strategies and the like. But one of our advisory panels from, I believe it was Amal from India, he kept talking about this opportunity to build their buildings out of this local brick material. And like that was what they were promoting for their sustainability strategy, which is an incredibly unique solution that was only applicable there, but was not something that like you would suggest in the US, right? That a university build a new part of its campus with its like material in its backyard. But that very much is a part of like the developing world who are working very closely with their local resources and capacities. And that was kind of our learning in the guide development, was that there were limitations to what we could do and who we could support. And that's why the community practice was born. So we definitely are hoping to engage with stakeholders from across the range of geographies and where they're starting from, and make those linkages as much as possible, so to promote joint learning. So there's a long answer for yes.
So anybody with questions, please put them into the chat room so that, our chat box, so that we can ask our friends at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network to answer them. They don't have to be tricky questions, but things that you're curious about. One of the problems is the organization is so comprehensive. You're really covering a lot of ground. One of the things that intrigued me, there was overlap between our work and your work, but there are new nuances to what you're doing. It has to do with guiding principles. It has to do with the kind of things that you use for decision-making criteria. There was one slide up there I copied before you changed it, a couple things, that it's transformational, it's critical need. It might have been for the San Diego project that you described, and then there was the other thing having to do with the guiding principles. And it would be nice if you tell us where we can look at those, study them more carefully. One way is, getting a copy of your slide presentation, but another is they might be in various publications. And because I would, our approach is also embodies that perspective. It's long range, starting today, but the impact long range. It's dealing with whole systems, the big picture. It's anyhow. There's a lot of overlap, and I'd like to get my eyes on a more on that information.
Professor Gable, both of those points are actually in both of the guides that we mentioned. So the guide that accompanies the regional decarbonization framework concept, that has some of those decision-making criteria and a lot of that language about the value of long-term pathways and then how to kind of the value proposition for creating them. So that's all in the guide. We can definitely share that to you. And the same thing with the guiding principles, that's on the Net Zero on Campus guide and on that website. And exactly right. Like, I think one of the things, at least for myself in my position at SDSN, kind of the theory of change in that it's not about project to project, but really trying to extrapolate these methodologies and then promote them, and then with the understanding that they can be customized and curated to different needs and different settings. But that's a key part of what Julie and I have tried to institutionalize in our work is how do we extract these methodologies, make it easy to read. Both of those guides, by the way, are about 50 pages. So like we are not talking about magnum opus documents, which, nobody really wants to dig into, but something that is very scrollable and that you can extract pieces. So we will pop both of those links in for you.
But that also is another important criteria. You're not making 1,000-page documents that, will, if at best, sit on somebody's shelf. They're usable, which brings up another question I have. You've got all this great work. Let's focus on either the San Diego project or the campus stuff. Okay, you don't want it sitting on the shelf or on the website, to use a more apt contemporary metaphor. How do you see getting it out and implemented in all the universities around the planet? I mean, is there a consideration to that, or does your work or concern stuff, okay, we've got it, let's put it on the web and hope that people like me get excited and run with it? But there's other folks out there that need to be convinced.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say so. We did actually two different strategies for each of the guides. For the San Diego guide, so that work is actually more applicable to a USA setting. We say it could be applied globally, but given like the policy framework that it's working within, it's better in the US. And so Julie here did an amazing job. Julie, I don't even remember how many contacts that you did the individual research for, but for municipalities, for state legislations, to any kind of government and NGO entity that we thought would be interested in doing this kind of intensive long-term planning work, we sent it to them directly and have had a few webinars and conversations and trying to connect the dots between our university members and those interested stakeholders. So that was the effort for that guide. For the Net Zero on Campus, I think Julie said this in her presentation, we realized we weren't starting from scratch, right? There were many other people who have worked on similar resources. That's why the directory ended up being created, because we wanted to collate those resources so you don't have to go to individual universities or NGOs to find them. You could find them all in one place. But we also then realized that there's lots of other networks, right? There's not just SDSN. There are, I want to say we have a list of more than 100 other university networks. And so we've already started to establish collegial partnerships with them where we're like, hey, we have this, might be interested to your stakeholders. Because while SDSN has nearly 2,000 members, there's a lot more universities globally, right? And so our strategy right now is to work with those other university networks so that we are connecting kind of a network of networks, if that makes sense. Julie, if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add for the Net Zero on Campus project specifically, when we were developing and scoping the project, we made sure to send out what we call the scoping survey to a subset of SDSN's members, just to make sure that this was something that they needed and to get feedback about at what stage of decarbonization they found themselves at, what kind of challenges and barriers they were facing, and what kind of tools and resources would be most helpful for them, so that we could design a project that there was an actual need for, in that sense.
There was an organization that precedes you folks, I think, pretty sure of this, the Academic Impact, the UN. Do you do any work with them? It seems like they ought to take your body of work and get it out to all of their 1,400 member institutions. But I also recognize that the UN organization is sort of, not everybody, it seems to, from the outside point of view, it seems to be a little bit siloed. And I don't know if that's real or what, but there is that group that ought to be thrilled with your work and take it and make it available. Maybe they already have, but I haven't seen it yet.
No, yeah, you're correct in that we haven't shared this specifically with them. It's actually our academy team that engages with them directly as our strategic nodal point. But I think it's a really good point, and perhaps, Julie, we should talk to the academy team about leveraging that linkage. They also work very closely with UNESCO as well.
All right, so I've been asking questions because the rest of the gang here seems to either be overwhelmed by all of your presentation or at a loss where to jump in and ask a question. I've got one more, and then if nobody here has anything to say, I think we should let you all go to your next important set of tasks. And the question I have, there is a group out there started in England, God knows, 15 years ago or so, the Transition Town movement. And there's a very active one, a couple of them locally, one, in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia in a small town, another one in Wilmington, Delaware. And what I've been inspired to do by what you're up to is to share it with the people I know involved in those organizations and tell them to get on your mailing list and join your effort, because if they pick it up, there's a lot of those transition town groups all over the place, and it might transition from present day to green world. So I think they would love all of your body of work there. All right, any other questions? I don't see anything. Edmund, you don't see anything there either? All right, so usually this group is a little bit more lively. Oh, wait, here we go. There is something. Let me get closer so I can read it. So this is just another thank you. Such a comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much for your insight. I think that's an expression of, everybody here. Thank you, Carly, for sharing that. I'm not, just so that you know, I'm not the only one enthusiastic about what you're doing, but we should let you go. And thank you. We've got a few things to move on to at this end, but this has been fantastic, and I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to having you see what it is this group of people develop. The research and development over the next week and a half will be hopefully of interest to you all.
Yeah, we'll see you next Friday, right?
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
And I'll be sending you more information about that as we get closer. But thank you again for your work and today's presentation.
Thank you.
All right. I will see you later.
Bye-bye.